We are here with the Mercy Music Podcast. Today we have Justin Kessler, our program director here of the music department. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, everybody.
Resounding applause.
Yay.
Thank you for making the time
Yeah.
to do this, of course.
I always have time for this.
We got a bunch of questions, but the one I'd like to start with is, what was the original spark that made music like an interest to you?
I was thinking about this, and it's really strange because this happened when I was really young. I suspect that in some sort of deeper, psychological, like the deep psychology of it, there was definitely some need, some childhood need for probably attention.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Probably attention and probably identity. I have an older older brother. So some sort of way to sort of define myself, some way to say this is what I'm about and everything. And I was really young in the early 80s when hip-hop started getting really popular, ironically. Hip-hop started getting really popular, early rap, so like Run DMC, the Fat Boys, stuff like that. For some reason, it really spoke to me. I was also spending a lot of time on the Upper West Side and my aunt's house, and so there was this feeling of the city and all of it, and I was just sort of in. It was the whole thing. I was breakdancing. I was, getting cans of spray paint and making a mess in my garage and things like that. It was the whole ball of wax. And that's really where it started, and I started writing raps. Started writing like little rap songs and things like that and trying them.
I've known you how many years, and I didn't know you were writing raps.
Yeah,
so
that's kind of where it started as a really little kid, and I got a very small early 4-track and started sort of making little beats and doing raps and stuff. And then slowly, this kid down the road from me had a very small guitar, a really small electric guitar. And for some reason, I just loved that thing. You plug it in and I would just like make noises. I couldn't play it for anything. And so I really started liking that. And then we had an acoustic guitar in the house. My brother was able to slide his fingers down the string and make it go boom. And I tried, and I couldn't for the life of me make it make any noise. Then, one day my brother brought home the Iron Maiden record, Somewhere in Time. This is probably like mid-'80s now, right? My brother brings home Somewhere in Time, and that just changed the whole game for me. Listening to this, I was just like, whoa. I had never heard music like that, the guitars. And I think it was really important, looking back on it, that Iron Maiden is one of those bands that, while not incredibly aggressive, it was sort of an aggressive sound, whatever, but they would disappear on these little music journeys. Like they would disappear from the song and go into this whole other section that was totally different. And then that would evolve into another section that was totally different. And that would evolve. And then eventually they would come back. And so I got really into this type of music for a really long time. It was the same thing with all of the early Metallica stuff, pretty much everything that Ozzy had ever done, and Black Sabbath, bands like that. So for a really good long while, from the time I was probably about 10 or so, until I was maybe about 15 or 16, it was all pretty much that kind of metal. Then somebody, I'd heard the Grateful Dead before, and didn't think much of it because I didn't really get the essence of it.
Okay.
And somebody offered me a ticket to a show, right? There's other things that go along with this conversation that aren't necessarily important with the, to the podcast or to our mission here. But
Mercy Music Podcast.
Music Podcast. But needless to say, like, I went and I was totally, like, I didn't know anything like that existed.
Yeah.
This was not music the way I'd ever seen it. I'd been to tons of concerts. This was not a concert so much as like a musical circus. It was like a happening where it bizarrely sort of seemed like the energy of the crowd was partly responsible for the music, and then like the music would move the crowd, and it was really this really strange thing.
Do you remember where it was?
That was at Nassau Coliseum.
Okay.
Yeah. From that day on, I was just sort of transformed. Around the same time, I went to a concert. Well, this was 92 now. I was 15 when this happened, but I went to a concert with my dad. My dad was really into Santana, so he took me to a concert. I was always listening to Santana. And in fact, to bring the story back a little bit, my dad started giving me lessons on a drum pad and on drum set when I was probably about 9 years old, but he listened to a lot of Santana. And so while I was driving in his car, I'm hearing these soaring, beautiful like Santana leads and stuff like that. And eventually I had to turn to him and be like, I really want to play the guitar. And it was actually hard for me.
You started on
tell him,
drums.
But I actually started on drums. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I never got good enough to do anything with it, but yeah, I started taking lessons on drums and quickly switched to the guitar. But eventually found, that the jam band situation I'd sort of fallen into was somehow really resonated with the sense of adventure that I sought in music. It wasn't just about getting together with people and just executing a song really well. There was a language that was being spoken and a conversation that was being had that I was very interested in being a part of, and getting involved in that. Like, if you're in a band and people are really good and you get in the band, and it'll inspire you to want to be better. And so really wanting to be able to speak that language more and more is one of the things that pushed me a little harder into the guitar and into music theory.
And you're already playing guitar at this point?
Already playing guitar, yeah, for a while.
Okay.
But
learning the metal riffs and stuff before Grateful Dead?
Yeah.
Stuff? Okay.
Yeah. I'm playing metal songs, figuring out sort of Metallica, Metallica solos and things like that.
Are you playing with people or just kind of?
There were a couple of points where I was playing with people, and I think it was like 7th grade. Some people tried to start this early band, and we got together. No, we didn't really do anything. We didn't really rehearse. Nobody really knew how to play. And then eventually my dad would start coming around a little bit later. My dad would come around, and he was the kind of player, and his musical influence was more steeped in improvisation. So he would just sit down and start playing. There was no song to discuss. There was nothing but, okay, I'm going to make noise with my feelings. You make noise with your feelings, and let's get in on that. So that evolved in me to really want to be able to do that well. And so that sense of adventure really, really played into everything that I wanted to do. That's kind of how I happened musically, and it's been that way since, pretty much.
And so that kind of takes you into high school-ish? Are you playing in bands at that point? Are you...
The whole arc of that takes me pretty much through high school.
Oh, yeah.
Where, I'm like 15, 16 when this stuff's happening. And then I had this really weird time in high school where I fell into the wrong stuff, stopped paying attention, and ultimately one day had to sort of walk away from all of my friends, a high school relationship, and had to end all of that really quickly and suddenly for my own good, for what I recognized to be my own good. And when I left that situation and sort of started wondering where I was at, the guitar was right there. I went home, I opened the case, I picked it up, and it's from 17 on, I started playing and really never stopped. Yeah, not a whole lot of bands transpired in high school, unfortunately. I wish they would have. There weren't a lot of people in my high school playing music, oddly enough. Yeah.
Interesting. But you're playing guitar.
Yeah.
And then I know you went... Did you go to college right away after high school, or did you like...
Yeah, so, the one thing parents don't like me saying out loud is that I actually didn't graduate high school. I mean, technically I did, but by the time I'd gotten to my senior year, I was so far behind. I was just way too far behind, and it was at that point, coinciding with this, starting to play again, that I actually started to value my life and my education and wanted to take things into my own hands and do everything I needed to do for me. So it's like I had messed up high school a little bit, but I saw this opportunity. A friend of my brother's had gotten kicked out of high school, and the next thing I knew, he was enrolled in college. He was going to the Culinary Institute, and I had no idea how that happened. And then he explained it to me, and he said, if you don't finish high school, you can just get your GED, and you turn 18, you can enroll at a community college. And from that point on, it's all about a GPA. They don't look at any of your high school stuff, no SATs, no high school transcript or anything. So go to a community college, do well, and transfer wherever you want to go. And that became my plan. And
Great plan.
I went to college right away. The semester I was supposed to, I went to Nassau Community, and I started studying music. That's when I got introduced to music theory.
Okay.
I had been playing based on patterns, reading tab, and sort of understanding some finger patterns and stuff. But that's when I really started to learn the language and sort of put it all on the fretboard, trying to understand it. And that's also when I started playing in bands seriously.
Nice.
That's where it really started, and I started to play shows and all of the good stuff that comes along with that. It's where I was really bitten by that bug. And mind you, the idea of recording, the idea of production
Not there yet, yeah.
didn't even cross my mind. Yeah.
And is this, because I know you studied classical guitar, is this that? Or
That's
is it?
that,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's what they had to offer. Unfortunately, I probably would have done a jazz guitar program, but they didn't have it. They did have classical guitar, and they did have a jazz teacher there. And so he got me into, and the classical guitar thing had me developing a finger style with the right hand. It had me taking everything I'd already been doing with a pick for all those years and starting to arpeggiate with the right hand and develop that sort of technique, which is still what I do today.
Yeah.
And then a little bit of jazz, a little bit of theory of jazz started to sort of open up that world to me. Unfortunately, I didn't have a great experience with it because I think a lot of the people around me were very competitive about it. They were all trying to get into like Manus and the New School and all these heavy, Manhattan School, and go to these heavy jazz programs. So they were all really, really full of it. They were just like, like if you couldn't play certain Charlie Parker lines, then you were just nothing, and they treated you that way. And it really didn't really gel with me. And I was already so enamored with the jam band thing, right? With songs, normal songs, like you and I would write, like, we'd hear on the radio, but there's always some point of departure where it's not just an extended guitar solo, it's literally everybody in the band jumping off the cliff together. We don't know where we're going. I'm going to do something, you're going to catch on to it and take us in a totally different direction that we never imagined before. And then we're going to try and work our way back or into the next thing or whatever. I was just really so laser focused on that type of playing, really for most of my life, that other things didn't get practiced, including classical guitar.
Yeah.
Actually.
And so you finished that program? And then
I didn't finish it. I transferred to Oneonta, the drummer that I was with. Still, great friend to this day. My drummer Pete lives in Charleston now, unfortunately. He's one of the ones who found Oneonta, and I went up there with him to check it out. And the same trip, we went to check out Berkeley. I think we had both gotten in. We went to check out Berkeley, and then we went back to check out Oneonta and decided we wanted to be there because we could have a house. We could have a cheap house off campus in this small little college town with like 40 bars and a captive audience. Yeah. That sounded pretty good to us. So, we enrolled, went there, and studied the music business, At that point, we started learning about publishing. We started learning what record labels were, how all of that stuff worked. And so that's the first time I started getting an inkling of the importance of recordings in general.
Are you making recordings at this point, or not really?
At that point, no. We're not making any recordings. It was difficult, actually. It was still really hard at that point. We would record rehearsals and things like that so we could mail things out and get gigs, but that was about it.
Yeah. So you're playing live still, you're doing all that.
Yeah, van and a trailer.
Yeah.
And driving to Albany and Buffalo and Syracuse and places like that.
And then so then what does that take you to more bands or to working in the field? Where does that take you?
Well, I loved that band.
Yeah.
I
What
loved
was the
that
name of it?
band
What
a
was the name
lot.
of
That
that
band was called Gas, Food, and Lodging.
Nice.
Right.
I
So
like
for
it.
a jam
Yeah,
band,
yeah.
it was great. We were
great.
using the road signs as symbols
Yeah.
and stuff. And I loved the name, and I really didn't want that band to end.
Okay.
But unfortunately, one thing led to another, and it wound up falling apart over the years. We just didn't know the right way to direct our energies. We didn't know how to really invest time and money into the right things that would
Yeah.
sort of propel us forward. So just life took us away.
Yeah.
The drummer, he met a girl. Everyone else sort of met, girlfriends and went in different directions. At that point, I just finished a degree. I just finished a bachelor's in the music business. So I wanted to use it.
Yeah.
I moved back down and started working in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Started working for the Verve Music Group.
Right.
At first as an intern
Mm-hmm.
in their A&R department, where I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from being in a major label environment and sort of seeing all the processes. And I got to start meeting artists, and I started to go down to the studio every once in a while to pick up things, drop off microphones, stuff like that. And occasionally I would hang out,
Yeah.
I remember the first time that happened, Joe Furla was recording John Schofield at Avatar. And he was like, hey, if you don't have anything to do, don't go back, hang out, sit around, check it out. He was so good. And I did. And I started looking at the processes and looking at what they were doing and really getting a feeling for it. And I was like, all right, seems like a really good next step. And I started thinking in that direction. Unfortunately, at that time, it was really still quite cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
And there was no Kickstarter. There was no way we were going to be raising that kind of money. And we didn't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
So we weren't making a record. That was kind of it. That job ended when I got offered a sort of a contract job through Blue Man Group. Blue Man Productions. They were doing a record with Gavin Rossdale and Dave Matthews and a bunch of really good people on there. And I was the label coordinator. There was a label director and me and the label coordinator. We were the record label.
Okay.
And so we had a packaging and distribution deal with Atlantic Lava. So we're negotiating that relationship. We're making sure the record's getting made okay. We're sort of going at the same time down to and getting like promo material, which really amounted to like drum heads with like blue lipstick kiss marks on it. And we would mail them all over the country to Tower Records and places like that existed at the time, and that basically became potential tour stops for what wound up being a full like international concert tour that was shot with multi-camera and eventually a DVD release. And that was the end of that. So after that, I just sort of looked around.
That's
and
serious, though. I mean,
it was a lot of work, and it was
Yeah.
a serious position to be in. But I was also not making music, and that started weighing on me a little bit.
How long is that whole? Because I'm imagining like a year and a half, 2 years for that.
Yeah,
whole cycle.
that winds up being about 2 years, maybe even 2.5.
Yeah.
I want to say it was about 2001 to sometime in 2003.
Wow. Yeah. So that's taken up.
Yeah.
It's like every day you're just blue.
Every
blue
day, and I'm in the city.
Are you playing guitar even at this point?
I am.
But just kind of.
But kind of, by myself.
In bands, not really.
No band at that point. Yeah. No band. No real time for a band.
Yeah.
At that point,
Yeah.
it was. But I was paying attention, and in my mind, I was preparing for a band.
Okay.
I was preparing for what would come next. And that is what came next. When that stopped, the next thing I did, instead of jumping into another job or seeking another job with a label, instead I backed off.
Okay.
And I started another band.
Nice.
With a bunch of friends. and we did the thing again. Van and a trailer.
Yeah.
We toured all over the Northeast. Again, we weren't really making records. We were recording our rehearsals on, burning them directly to CD and then slapping a label on there, making a little cover, mailing them out to bars and clubs. And at that point, it was fine. Nobody, there was no YouTube, no social media to ask to see. It was just like, oh, I like the way this sounds, come play. And so that was great. Did that for another couple of years. And then we moved to Boston together with the intention of making a record. At that point, we had written enough original songs that we were like, all right, now I think the next step in understanding what I had learned from those years with the record companies like that, I was like, all right, it's essential. We need a record.
Yeah.
We need something, to level up in that way.
For clarity, you're playing guitar and singing, or just
I'm
playing
playing guitar and singing.
and
yes.
singing? These are your songs, or are these the
These are
band's?
predominantly my songs. Yeah, predominantly my songs. Although I never wanted it to be that way.
Yeah.
I always wanted the collaboration. So I was always encouraging my bandmates to write songs, and they always did. So there was always a mixture. Which was fantastic. Now, when I say I was singing, I had no formal training in singing. I was never in chorus. So really, I was either just speaking the lyrics over my playing and shouting at other points, and developed a lot of really bad behaviors that I eventually had to go back and address. Yeah, as people know, and eventually found out that singing is a physical mechanism. There's support involved, and there's an actual physicality to it, that I had developed such a focus and such a connection to the guitar. It became really difficult to shift my focus that way when I was playing. And even now, I work to really establish, being able to do both. But I like to think that my singing has come a long way.
Yeah. Well, I know it has. But so you're in Boston. You gotta maybe make a record. Sounds like there's an asterisk there.
Yeah, there's a huge asterisk there. Yeah. So we're gonna maybe make a record. We're trying to make a record. We hooked the house up, and we hooked up with my friend Brett, who was in school to learn how to make records. None of us really knew what we were doing. And we were all living together, so there was some weird, household tension and things like that. And that's ultimately what did us in. In the process, through that school, I met this old power station engineer, original power station, pre-Avatar, pre-Berkeley power station, named Al Shapiro, who had done a bunch of stuff with like the Grateful Dead and John Lennon and the Stones. And he kind of became a mentor to me. In a lot of ways, and I started spending some time in the studio figuring out what was going on, making these little audio collages. I bought myself a version of Pro Tools with a 002, right? I think it was like $1,100-$1,200 at the time or something.
Yeah, it was so expensive.
002 rack. It was like Pro Tools 5 or something we were on.
Crazy.
It was interesting. But started messing around with audio. I started recording songs in my little basement room and piecing things together. That band ultimately wound up falling apart during the recording process, partly because the drummer could not agree to the click track. And that became like a real undoing somehow. And it shouldn't have. But in the distance that it created and the frustration it created, everybody had other places to go, and sort of everybody did go into other things. So that ended, right?
Yeah.
And I had been putting together recordings, and eventually that guy Al Shapiro just kicked the studio door closed, and he was just like, "Hey, you want to move back to New York?" And I was just like, "I guess, maybe." I had started to, at this point, write and record some songs of my own and record demo type versions of
You
my
kind
songs.
of hanging out at his studio though, and up there.
A little bit,
in Boston?
mostly with this 002.
So mostly
in
on
my
your own,
room.
but
mostly on my own.
You
But
have
also,
this friend, mentor, like
right, and so he was working through the school, the New England Institute of Art up there. It was an AI school, and they had great studios, and a lot of my friends went there, and so I was there, and we were doing stuff. And yeah, I had access to those rooms and did some interesting recordings, actually. There was one instrumental recording with a saxophone player, Bobby Gay, who was fantastic. He played with Aerosmith and bands like that. And so I started getting a little bit used to the studio environment at that point, and used to the tools. I was getting okay with Pro Tools. I was starting to figure out the signal flow. There was an SSL. It was like a 4000G.
So no real formal training with audio, but just
no
kind
real
of
formal
learning
training at that. Yeah,
just grabbing mics, not even really carrying, maybe, or like just like whatever they had, kind of thing.
That's where it started, and then ultimately I did enroll.
Oh, you did?
I did enroll ultimately, and did 1 year
okay.
at this school, and earned another associate's degree or something like that.
With the intention of learning, like recording.
It was the only intention was to learn to do this stuff, and that the only intention was to bring my music to life. I had no intention of going to work in a studio at that point. It was just a matter of what was going to feed my my bug and get me hopefully get me involved in something that would escalate. But Al Shapiro had different ideas. And so he took out his phone and he started making phone calls. And I quickly found out that he knew everybody in New York City, because I was sitting there and he was on the phone with Bob Clearmountain and Tino Passante and, everybody. And then the next thing I knew, I had interviews all over the city. And I went and, Avatar was extremely impressive, and so was Electric Lady. And so I committed myself to sort of intern there, because that's the deal they offered me. They were like, well, you can intern here. We'd love to have you as an intern. You do the right thing. Eventually you'll step up to be an assistant. And also at Clinton. And I was really kind of focused on Electric Lady at first. I was really kind of psyched to be there. But I got a phone call from Clinton and them saying, oh, listen, we're moving our night manager up to be an assistant engineer. We can start paying you $10 an hour, and you get the alarm code and the keys.
That sounds like a good deal.
Sounds like a good deal, right? For a world-class facility, 2 Neve 8078s, and, the CBS mic collection and pianos and stuff. So it was pretty great. And I started bringing in bands from Brooklyn and, messing around and trying to figure that stuff out.
So you moved back to New York from Boston.
Moved back to New York from Boston and was doing that full time. I was sleeping at this, before I knew it, I was sleeping at Clinton, and I was putting my heart and soul into it, and not playing music. So at this point, it was like, okay, well, if you're going to be in this world, you got to get good at it, and you're not good at it, so why don't you focus on this for a while? And it's a weird thing. A lot of my experience, it turns out, and this might be, revealing, but a lot of my experience, it turns out, based on the places I was, were centered toward tracking sessions and not necessarily mixing. And so I had a lot of exposure to that kind of stuff, and a little bit less to mixing. There was definitely a lot of mixing sessions, a lot of stuff, but not to the point where I was ever really able to hang and ask questions and to get a feel for what was going on. So I developed a better sense of putting microphones in front of instruments and being able to run sessions for recording purposes than I did for how to finish and deliver the production.
And they're wildly different things.
And they're wildly different things, and that's kind of where I was. I was at Clinton for a number of years, and then one of our engineers, who was like a notch above me, he kept going up to a new place up in Woodstock called Alair. And he went up there, he did a Guster record and came back all
which one, do you know?
I don't remember which one, but I do, and I remember I wanted to mention to him, and then they were here, but I didn't. It would have been somewhere around like 2006, 2000, in that area. I'm pretty sure, like I want to think I remember correctly that it was Guster, and he went up there, and he was totally blown away, and he loved it, and they then called him sometime at the end of 2006 or so. They gave him a call and they were like, hey, we need somebody permanent up here. And he didn't want to leave Clinton because he had a good thing going. And he was like, listen, move to Woodstock. For me, that was a big yes.
I mean, and that just speaks to the who you know in the field and being there and being able to say yes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
And it was fantastic. And when I close my eyes and, that's where I am. I go back there in my mind all the time. I go back there physically all the time too. But, I don't like to talk necessarily about mistakes or, those crossroads and things like that. But there are a couple of times where I look back and wish I had made different decisions, or not wish, but maybe wonder what would happen.
Yeah, of course. Who doesn't?
Staying at a lair would have been one. I mean, hey, look, they were closing anyway.
Right.
They closed anyway. Clinton closed anyway.
Right. Change is going to come whether you want it to or not.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I might not have been any better off. But anyway, it was fantastic. And then ultimately they did start rumbling about closing, and so I moved back down. I met my...
Well, I want to... Sorry, on that studio, because it's such a great space, was there any fun project that you could speak on there that you did there?
Oh, the Black Crows.
I know there's a lot of Black Crows, The
Black Crows War Paint.
Yeah.
It was my favorite, and sort of when I think back to the times that I had there and how involved I was, and just the magic of the sort of month that we were there together and living there together and going to have dinner in Woodstock together and going to, Levon's for a ramble and stuff like that, and just being with those people, being with the Robinson brothers and watching them at work, watching Chris Robinson sit there with a notepad and coming up with lyrics and then getting up to the mic and performing those lyrics onto the record. And
people still make records that way, but not as much, I feel like, right? I don't know if I love making records that way, but a lot of our students, maybe just take them through that, like what that even is. Like a band books out a studio for a month.
Yeah. I mean, I feel very fortunate. And sometimes I talk to the students about this because I do feel, I don't want to use the word spoiled, but I feel really fortunate to have been able to be part of that. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing that is afforded by, having the money to put a band in a studio like this for a month, where a day lockout could have been anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 per day, So that experience is really, really fantastic. And one of the best things about it is there's not a whole lot of hurry up, let's get this done, and it sounds good enough. We spent that whole first day setting up instruments, moving instruments around the room, setting up mics, listening, getting drum sounds, listening to the drum sounds, moving things again, putting certain things between, putting gobos between other things, moving amps into adjacent rooms, and really spending a full 14 hours or so getting the whole thing dialed in before we really started into working on the tunes. I love that. And then came in early the next morning and they were just playing it. It wasn't a matter of recording the drums and then recording the bass and then recording the guitar. They were all recording it together, and including the vocal, although we did redo a lot of the vocals. So the vocals were recorded with a booth of sort of tall gobos with plexiglass windows that we built in the space. And he recorded the vocals, sort of a little bit lower and softer, to avoid some bleed, and then went back and redid it. But it all went down, together. Much of it to a click and some of it not to a click.
Right.
There was one great track that I engineered that... it was an acoustic track, and for whatever reason, they were like, let's go outside. And so we went outside. There was this giant courtyard area between the two spaces at a lair, with this big sort of stone wall between them, where bats would fly past your head at night and stuff. But they all just took everything outside, and so Paul Stacey, who was producing the record, he was playing guitar for the Crows, but the deal was he wasn't allowed to play guitar on the record if he wanted to produce it. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a Robinson thing for sure.
Whoa, that's a good tidbit.
You want to produce a record? Sure, you can't play guitar. But they brought in Luther Dickinson from the North Mississippi All-Stars, who...
Yeah.
Amazing. Just incredible. But everyone set up outside on this stone wall, and Paul came and he was just like, we got to get this. Yeah. So we started running lengths of cable outside and, really, trying to do everything we can to get out there. You can hear birds on the track.
Oh, man. That's awesome.
It's really interesting.
So it's like you spend a day getting sounds, but then now you're rushing because you need to get it quick.
Right.
You're going to lose the moment, right?
Somebody has an idea and it's just like, oh, okay, we need to make this happen. How do we make this happen? Yeah.
I imagine no headphones. They're just playing acoustic.
Yeah. For that one, no headphones. When we're inside, during the actual setup, there were headphones.
Yeah.
Everyone was on headphones.
Yeah. That's great.
There were a bunch of great records during that time. There were a bunch of kids from Detroit called the Satin Peaches that were phenomenal, and a UK producer who came over named Owen Morris for that one, who had done like a lot of like, Britpop type stuff, Oasis and Blur type stuff and everything. So I really liked learning from him. He did a bunch of things that I really enjoyed, like chasing the bass line with a Moog synth.
Yes.
Redoing the bass part with a Moog synth and actually playing it out, and things like that I learned during those sessions that were really cool.
Post Woodstock.
Post Woodstock, I come back. At this point, I have my future wife, future ex-wife, to be the mother of my kids. We met when I was in Woodstock, and things were starting to deteriorate a little bit, and I started sort of looking around. It was also whatever it is in me that eventually needs to seek that. I was living by myself up there. There's definitely a certain degree of, of like a loneliness thing that maybe started to set in. She had it together down here in Westchester, and so I moved down and immediately sort of started setting into that mode, but I needed work. Yeah. I went back to Clinton for a minute, but I couldn't really have my old position back. Right? It was occupied. But I did go back there for a minute, kind of hanging out, and while I was back there, I got the call because when I was at Clinton previously, a group came in to record a 16-piece orchestra for a TV show that they were going to be pitching to the network called The Wonder Pets. And I hooked up with them. I asked them if I could edit the recordings. I got to know the producer, Jeffrey Lesser, a little bit, who was like, old school media sound engineer. He had done a bunch of Barbra Streisand and the Chieftains and that kind of stuff. But he was the music director for this thing, and he took me in to do some editing. And then when I got back from Woodstock, I heard through the grapevine at Clinton that they were looking for somebody for a full-time, it was a contract, so there was an end, but for a full-time position, it was going to mean health insurance. Oh, wow. And I was looking, at this point, I was starting to talk about maybe getting married. And health insurance sounded pretty impressive to me. Yeah, it was also a regular salary, and I was commuting down to the South Street Seaport. It felt pretty good. It was a good gig. But like everything else, that came to an end. And when that came to an end is when I really started looking around, trying to figure out how to make something a little bit more permanent that would allow me to use everything I've learned, to continue to steep myself in this, to advance all of my knowledge, to connect with other musicians and artists, and most importantly at that point, to get back to the musician in me, to get back to my writing, get back to my playing, get back to me wanting to have made and released a record at that point. And that's what I did. And so I started looking around. I held a couple of really weird positions. Like I did a little marketing for a print company through a guitar player friend that I knew, and tried things like that. Eventually started working at Trader Joe's for health insurance. And then ran into, as I was looking around, I didn't run into, I actually was offered years ago, years before that, when I was still, it was actually when I was done with the label thing, and it was sort of in the Boston transition, I went back to Nassau Community and I dropped off a resume and had my music business and my record label experience on there. And I said, I wouldn't mind teaching if that's something that ever came up. And it didn't. But then at that point, after the Wonder Pets thing, I got a call from Nassau saying that their music business instructor was going on a maternity leave. Would I want to teach for a semester?
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I did. I took it. It was great. The money was pretty good. And I got to connect. I mean, I was supposed to be teaching the music business, but these kids were excited to learn about compressors and preamps and microphones. And so we talked about everything. And I loved it. I just really loved it. And then that's when I started looking around. How do I do this a little bit more? And I
didn't know that was where you... Yeah, I didn't know. That's amazing. Yeah.
I reached out to, I started looking around at programs and stuff because I realized that I would probably need an advanced degree to do that. And I met Dave Gluck at Purchase. Yeah. And he sort of broke his situation down to me. And he was like, I teach, I'm, working in the program. I teach my courses. I have my family, we live okay. And then, I have this band that I'm in, Rhythm and Brass. And we go and we play. Yeah. We tour, we play, we do the whole thing. And I was just like, that's it. Yeah, that's the key to having this in my life, having some stability for a family, and really being able to get back to my own playing and my own production and stuff. And the rest
how'd you
is
meet
history.
Dave Gluck though?
Well, I met him by going to Purchase just to poke around.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I went there just to like roam the hallways and look around and see what happened. And I ran into him and I was just like, oh, hey, can I ask you what goes on here?
Yeah. Amazing.
And then the rest is kind of history. It did allow me to get back to playing, and get back to myself.
I guess just to finish the journey, because I think it's awesome for our students to hear this. But so you go to Purchase, and then I guess a part-time thing open, like audio, like I think so. One of the positions open here, I forget which teacher left.
Well, there was a couple of things that happened. I think it might have been Rippin that was going to leave or something. Yeah. And I was starting to adjunct at every place I possibly could. Nassau again. I hooked up with Westchester Community, and they gave me a couple of courses.
And you're done at Purchase at that point?
I'm done at Purchase at that point. But while I was at Purchase, I had a kid. Right. So my older kid, my son Isaac, was born, and I'm working 40 hours a week at Trader Joe's for health insurance and money, right? And I'm married at this point, and the whole bit. So it felt like pretty important and imminent that I find work. Yeah. And so I'm reaching out everywhere to try and get something to happen. And I reached out to Mercy when we were still in White Plains, and Paul saw it, and he saw me, I think, probably pretty similarly to the way he saw you. It's like we kind of became his kids. Yeah. And it was just like, and he really went above and beyond to help me out, and he gave me classes to teach. But I was
You did the work. You've done the work. You did the masters. You did these things, and you were prepared to say yes to these things and be offered it.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you remember? I think it would have been one of the audio courses I think you taught was the first ones, right?
Actually, I think it might have been a MIDI. Really? It might have been an electronic music for the first ones, because Steve was still teaching audio, I think, at that point.
That's right. He taught me audio. Yeah. That's right. But that would have been 2005, 2006.
And I'm teaching at a bunch of different places, but full-time work was my goal. Yep. I needed that. And I was offered a position in South Texas, Corpus Christi. And I moved my whole family down there. It cost me way too much money. And I'm down there for about 6 months or so, and I got a call that this position had opened up full-time, and he was just like, we have a full-time thing open. I'm encouraging you to apply, wink, wink. And I did, and, flew up here. And I remember flying up here for the interview from Texas, and just the feeling of flying over the Hudson again, and like seeing home, and like the potential of things opening up for me, and really that opportunity coming, I think really felt good, and it worked out. Ultimately, it worked out, and here I am.
Yeah. I mean, we're glossing over like many years of adjuncts, actually, because I guess not as many as I'm just the move happened, the very famous 2012 move from White Plains to here happened. So. Yeah, that was intense, but that's another podcast. But so and then I guess it was like 2012-13. Then you would have been full time. I guess
fall of 13 is where I started full time, and I know because my second child was born right then.
Amazing.
August 31st of that.
And then are you teaching audio at that point? I can't.
At that point, I
right?
was started teaching audio.
Okay. Yeah.
Steve gave me the audio classes, and
doing-
he moved over to electronic music. I wasn't teaching any of the music business classes at that time. I believe I also taught some intro to music tech when we were running that.
Yeah.
And
so
other
that was
things.
actually, but that was, we didn't have these studios yet. We were upstairs.
No,
and
we were
rented.
upstairs.
That's a whole other story too.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we built these in 16. And then, amazing.
We've come so far.
We have. It's amazing. Oh. It's incredible. And then, just to find, I guess, Paul leaves, Steve takes over. And then, was it just this past September?
This was just this past September.
Oh my gosh.
Well, we trained for it all
right,
last year.
Right, we did. Right, yeah. It feels like it. Yeah, and it was, heading that way. And then Steve officially wasn't director, I guess, in September, right, of 2024. Yeah. Right, and you've been, wow, it feels longer. That's a good thing, I think. It feels like, because we've been doing amazing things. We've been doing a lot of amazing things. Wow, what a journey. Incredible. But I think what we glossed over, because we were focused on Mercy, because that's interesting, we're here. But throughout that whole period, you're making music with people, lots of people, including your own projects. And, I know you've been releasing music. I mean, speak on that path, I guess.
Well, it was a weird path, and you'll remember, I had disconnected from the instrument for a long time.
That's right.
And while I was making records, I wasn't really playing. And then when I got back to Purchase, I did get another guitar, but I had a really weird time connecting with it again. And there was part of me that knew that by my nature, if I really opened that can of worms again, I was going down the road. That was it. I was going to be, unstoppably moving in that direction. And so I didn't play the guitar, and I needed to continue to play. So while I was in Texas, I started messing around with the banjo. And really trying to get into the banjo. And it was like, okay, this is fun. I'm doing it. It feels good. I'm able to exercise some of what I love in terms of the playing and the physicality of it, but no sustain. It's just like, it just didn't do the thing. So I was like, but you know what? I wasn't quite ready to get back to the guitar yet again. And so I picked up the mandolin and I spent a while.
Yeah, I remember you were serious.
I was really seriously playing the mandolin, really seriously trying to put together a band, doing what I do, centered around the mandolin, which is not quite bluegrass. It's really more of a jam band, electric jam band situation, but, with a mandolin.
Yeah.
And then, it was like the beginning of 2019 is really when it happened. I just sort of one day, I was thinking about it a lot over the course of a few months, and even had would occasionally start to do like a finger style thing on the mandolin, which doesn't work.
Yes, that does not.
And eventually, I actually literally was driving and pulled my car over, and just sort of, I'm a sensitive guy. I'm not afraid to. I burst into tears. Yeah. I pulled over, and there was like an awakening. I had like this whole awakening happen, and I just knew at that point that I had to start playing the guitar again. I had no choice. Yeah, and I did, and it's just been.
I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing, because people go down different paths of different instruments, right? And I mean, when I say you were all in on the mandolin. You had pedal boards. You were performing. You played on some of my records on mandolin. You played on some of my friend Michael's stuff. There's a couple things I can remember, but you were like, it wasn't guitar. It was like Kessler's playing mandolin,
that's who I am,
singing.
right?
That's it.
Yeah.
And then you didn't like make an announcement about it, but it was just like one day it was like, there's guitars again. There's more pedals. There's more amps here. There's more guitars.
I guess I didn't announce it because I would have had to
who would,
explain the whole story and explain my my weird reluctance to connect to the instrument again, because I know what a hold it has.
But I think our students, and I think anybody listening could relate to that. And it's all, but it wasn't the banjo and certainly the mandolin. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I assume it wasn't wasted time.
Oh no, not at all.
That's a path to find out what maybe worked next better on guitar. And I don't know if you play mandolin at all anymore, but you could still play mandolin on things if you wanted to, right?
I do, yeah. And the whole time I was sort of talking myself back into writing music and singing as well. So it really helped to escalate that conversation as well. And after a little while, once I got the guitar back to me, it just skyrocketed from there. I started writing songs again, and
Does that lead us to fairly current performance?
That leaves us to fairly current.
And where? So where? I mean, you're playing live, I know, with some friends and some bands, and I don't know if you want to touch on that for a second.
Well, I spent the past couple of years trying to put together bands centered around my own original music, to some frustration. I really am a band person.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of person who ever really intended to write my songs as overdub pieces and to release them like that. But I didn't really have much of a choice. I kept trying to meet people and put something together, but something about it just never really happened. Until, sort of this past summer, maybe last spring, I just decided I really needed to put myself out there and connect to the Grateful Dead community. I know that, there are Grateful Dead cover bands everywhere, and I would often go out see them, and just sort of, it wasn't a jealousy thing. It was almost like a calling. Like, it was like, I know that I should be doing this, and yet I'm not. For some reason, whatever. And so I started putting out ads and answering ads and going to rehearsals here and there and everywhere. And I went to one in Manhattan where I met some people that actually are from Portchester, from up here. And we've been putting together rehearsals, and then it seems like this one band is just skyrocketing, because now we've got a residency. We've got like a residency, a once a month, every second Thursday thing happening at Lucy's in Pleasantville now. Nice. We're doing this four day string of shows for the Phil Lesh celebration at the Capitol Theater. Nice. We're playing at Joey's in Portchester, and there's a lot of these sort of bar owners and club owners that are starting to get wind of us and are asking us to do some stuff. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm happy. And I still have every intention of it, including my original music, and to bringing these people in to really sort of do my original music in the right way, in the way that I had always intended. That should be coming relatively soon now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get through a couple of quick fire things.
Okay.
All right. What's a plugin you're liking right now? Do you use any plugins? Do you use plugins?
I love plugins. Yeah, I have the same go-to stuff. I love all the UAD stuff, the precision limiter in there, and I use oxide tape on my master bus and stuff. I love the Oxford EQ, as it takes you down below 20 hertz and stuff. The plugin that I am most impressed with lately is still Soothe.
Yeah.
It's just changed the game in so many ways, I really like the UAD stuff, UAD compressors, the Pultec EQs.
Nice.
Yeah, that's really where I
said
centered.
one, though.
One.
What's one? No.
Well, it's UAD.
Yeah, nice.
UAD.
No, that's great. I agree. All those are great. And what about is there any hardware that you're finding yourself reaching for, either in our studios or at home? Or it could be mic, it could be hardware, it could be.
I love all of the Focusrite ISA pre's that we have here. As sort of a transformer based, but like not heavy-handed kind of option. I have the four channel ISA I have at home, and I use it to track. I also like it in combination with an LA2, but I use the UAD plugin at home. It doesn't always catch that first transient so quickly, but it's it really adds quite a lot, and that limiter is pretty fantastic. Yeah, I'll reach for combinations of things. I actually really still like to experiment. I really love when we get new stuff, we get new preamps. I'm most psyched to try them on different things. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in there, any new hardware that I'm really very excited about. I like the curve bender. It's got one of my favorite hardware based devices, plug-in too, but one of my favorite things for mix concern to begin with is going to be high pass filters. So when preamp or EQ includes some sort of a variable high pass filter, even notched is good, but as long as it's, relatively useful, I love that, because I really love being able to track my sounds and then, have it be relatively where I'm going to want it in terms of the low end anyway.
Get it right in the room.
Get it
right. And that's all your tracking experience. I mean, you've tracked many records. And
that's where I like to,
right.
I like to have fun with that. And I really love that feeling of getting everything wired up and plugged in and then just playing and just having, experiencing it.
All right, 2 more, because we've been. This has been great. This has been amazing. All right, so last full record you listened to, last full record, start to finish. I don't even know what I would answer that.
I mean, I drive over an hour to get here and back every day, so I'm listening to this stuff all the time. Yeah. And usually it involves a deep dive into some band. Okay. I had recently done a Bowie deep dive. Nice. I had done a Blur deep dive. And honestly, somebody had compared something I was doing to Damon Albarn recently. And sort of, I was like, oh, I like it. Yeah. And then I was looking, I was like, I had no idea he was in Blur. And then I looked back and I went back through the catalog and I love it. Yeah, I'm really.
Sometimes those references are amazing because someone says, "Oh, you sound like XYZ," and it's like I don't even know.
I don't even know. Yeah,
but let me check it out, and then you're like, "Oh, I kind of do."
Right, Blur, Gorillaz. Yeah, sure, I'll take it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Take the compliment. So yeah, it probably was one of those Blur records.
Yeah, nice. And then it doesn't have to be for our students because it can be someone. We have students of all ages, but for somebody just wanting to enter, what you do, what we do, it doesn't have to be at a school level, but if you want to get into music, like what's a place you would start? Like if you're in 2025.
If you want to learn to play the guitar, get yourself a guitar.
Yeah.
That's sort of fundamental. You really have to invest in some equipment. You have to get yourself working on a DAW that does the thing that you want to do. If you want to track bands, if you want to track your own band, you got to get with the DAW that does that, and you have to build a little bit of a hardware system, an interface that contains enough preamps, enough microphones to maybe record a drum set in your bedroom, something like that. But, I think that the knowledge and the underlying knowledge and skills are important, but I don't think they are nearly as important as the experience. Yeah. I think that experience will inform and provide knowledge and skill, but I don't think it is really the other way around. Right. I think, in most things, knowing how something works, like, reading the medicine bottle and understanding what it's supposed to do isn't the same as taking the medicine. Mm-hmm. So I would really recommend somebody getting started in this to put together a system and then to just start making music. Make really bad recordings right away. Give yourself permission to screw it up and just screw it up every single day until you're not doing that, until you're not screwing it up anymore. Record 100%. Everything you can possibly get your hands on and don't necessarily get hung up on the outcome. I mean, we want to train toward those outcomes. They do get better in time. Knowing how to mic a drum set never made me any better at recording drums for some crazy reason. And maybe this is just me, but the experience over time and the feel and the adjustment to it, and being able to hear certain things and pick certain things out that I know are going to be problems later on. It's just about the experience.
Yeah. Jump in, do it.
Right? Yeah. Just do it. And that's kind of it.
Well, thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
This was amazing.
Yeah,
thank you, Aaron, so and the crew here for doing this.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I look forward to more.
Indeed. You'll be back.
Yeah.
We'll have you, Andy. Yeah, we'll do a more nerdy one. Yeah. We'll do like...
And you all people, play an instrument. Learn an instrument. Learn the drums, learn guitar. You are walking around with a voice that can sing, and it doesn't matter who you are. Your skull was designed through a very, very long process of evolution in order for you to be able to sing. Don't waste it. Music is not just about commerce. It's not just about performance. Music is something that's about connectivity and expression. It's an art, and we need to be doing it. We've been doing it together as humans for about as long as we've been looking at fire and writing on cave walls. Don't let it become a product. Don't let it become this commercial thing that is for these people and not for me, right? you make music. I guarantee you won't be sorry.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, like, I would make every recording song I wrote for myself and made, I would make regardless of people listen to it or not. Like, I'm going to make this because I like this.
It's
I
one
like
of the reasons I love The Dead and I love playing, because he's like, we'd be doing this anyway.
Right.
All of this
it's
is
great.
fantastic.
If you want to listen, fantastic. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's nice to play for people.
Yeah.
And people are like, if you want to listen to it, that's amazing. But I'm making this, Yeah. I get mad. Like, this is for the fans. Like, no, it's for you. Like, you're making this because you want to make this. Like, hopefully.
Yeah.
If you really mean it,
Yeah. And you put your attention and your art into it and really put a lot of effort into things, and you get it out there honestly, then, the paths that bring things to people's attention are still going to be there, and you still get things out in the same way, but focus on the craft,
Nice.
Cool.
Boom.